Assalamu alaikum dear students. Welcome to the third lecture of Consultancy Project Experiential Learning. I can't say we've come a long way in discussing various topics related to this course, but I guess there are, as I said earlier, that there are only a few lectures for this course, so this is all we're going to see each other. In fact, you're going to see me. I guess you are lucky. In any case, in the third lecture, we would be discussing further theories of learning process. In the last lecture, we discussed, let me give you a recap of what we discussed in the last lecture. We discussed the theory of behaviorism. Behaviorism was a theoretical perspective about how people learn. And we were discussing, we started with the history and then we came to the current theories about the learning process and how people acquire knowledge from the environment. And in that case, there were like two main theories under the behaviorism. One is classical conditioning and the other one was operational conditioning. In the classical conditioning, we defined that there are basically one type of specifically unconditional stimuli which generates automatic reflex action. So for example, smelling a food and then feeling hungry. And then there is a neutral stimuli, and when an individual associates the neutral stimuli with that unconditional stimuli, then neutral stimuli converts into conditional stimuli, and that conditional stimuli actually takes the properties of unconditional stimuli, and then it becomes, you can say, it generates conditional response. We gave an example of the case where, for example, when you feed a dog with the meat, and that is an unconditional stimuli and then generates an unconditional response that it feels hungry. But every time when you ring a bell with while feeding that dog, then that ringing a bell was previously a neutral stimuli. The dog had no response to that ringing, but as soon as the dog starts to associate, when the dog pairs these two events together, then it feels hungry whenever the bell rings. So the neutral stimuli converts into conditional stimuli. The bell, the sound of the bell converts into conditional stimuli and then takes on the properties of unconditional stimuli. That was actually the feeding of food. And based on this bell, the dog's response, which was unconditional response in the start based on unconditional stimuli, now converts into conditional response, and the dog feels hungry just because of sound of that bell. So this is basically was the concept of classical conditioning, and in this classical conditioning, a conditioned response is generated because of a conditioned stimuli, which is when associated with an unconditional stimuli. Now, we also gave that there are other examples. For example, the most interesting one was that getting salary makes us happy. But since that salary is paired very often paired with certain date, for example, first of each month, the first of each month does not matter to us. It is a neutral stimuli for us for most of our lives. But then as soon as it is paired, when we start working, we do jobs, as soon as it gets paired with, you can say, the unconditional stimuli, then the first of each month makes us happy. So then that is a real life example of that classical conditioning. The second one we discussed was operational conditioning, in which individual's behavior is associated with the consequences of that action. For example, positive consequences which are accepted actually increases the likelihood of that action or that behavior, and negative consequences decreases the likelihood of that action or that behavior. Now, in this case, we discussed that there are additions, for example, positive reinforcement and punishment, and there are subtractions, for example, negative reinforcements and extension. And we specifically showed or discussed and gave examples in this case that, for example, if an individual comes late to his office, then introducing a introducing a punishment for that would, for example, giving him a warning letter, or for example, cutting his salary or making him work extra hours. These are sorts of punishment which are added in the system, and then that individual, the likelihood of that sort of behavior is removed. So we discussed various examples and showed that this sort of environment actually is often seen in the classrooms, where students are punished for not performing good in exams through bad grades, through tough markings, for example, and they are given better grades and they get for example, A plus or A minus or A for performing very well in the class. So So this is actually associated to the real life scenario, and this sort of operant conditioning and classical conditioning, actually specifically operant conditioning, takes place in the classroom environment, works in the offices also. We use operant conditioning in the classrooms to make students perform well, to increase their productivity in the offices as well, to increase their interest in whether it is studies or their office assignments. So we use various types of stimuli from the environment to direct the behavior in the direction that we want. This actually operant conditioning starts from the very early ages. When a kid starts growing up, we actually slap the kid for every time, or shunt the kid every time he does something wrong, he or she does something wrong, and we reward the kid for every good behavior. So basically, still there were certain criticisms that we discussed. As I said in the start, that how do people learn is a very difficult question to answer. There is no concrete answer to that question. But then there are various theories. Various theories cover various aspects. So most of the theories are criticized later on. Like whatever theories that we are going to discuss have certain criticisms. The reason is that these theories originate from different elements, and the theories that originate from conflicting elements are conflicting theories. So it does not necessarily mean that a theory is completely void. Because the theory of behaviorism, when we go on to discuss other theories, has been criticized. And because the first and foremost criticism is that it treats knowledge as an absolute, that knowledge is complete and absolute knowledge is imparted in the students. It treats it basically you can say fall in the category of the student being a vessel, a passive learning concept. So the issue is that, but still, if the operant conditionality and the classical conditioning is actually observed in the real life world, then you cannot completely reject the theory. There are theoretical foundations that exist for origination of that theory, and it is criticized because it does not cover all the aspects. It is the learning process, as we discussed many times. The learning process is very complicated. It is different people learn differently. Different people learn differently from the same stimuli from the environment. So it is very difficult to understand that exactly one theory would fit all. So it does not happen. So in any case, we later on, the theory of behaviorism was criticized on the base of theory of cognitism, the theories based under cognitism. These theories, many theories originated from, for example, philosophy, from psychology, from anthropology, from neurology, different fields of science. So if they originated from different fields of science, then they must have different theoretical foundations. So around 1950s, the theories of cognitism gained strength over the theory of behaviorism, because the scientists said that the theory of behaviorism does not consider the cognition of human being, the intellect level, how they absorb the knowledge and how they use that knowledge. So that is why the theory of cognitism came into existence. So in psychology, cognitism is a theoretical framework for understanding the mind that gained credence in 1950s, around that time, 1950s and 60s. The movement was a response to behaviorism, which cognitivists said neglect to explain cognition. This is exactly what I explained earlier in a few words before. This psychology of learning, which emphasizes human cognition or intelligence as a special endowment enabling man to form hypotheses and develop intellectually. So the theory of cognition, basically, or cognitive development, it's another name. It also considers the human intellect and human's ability to form an hypothesis, test that hypothesis, and then reach to a conclusion. And in that process, that human develops intellectually, that his intellectual development increases. He develops himself intellectually, right? So that is the main thing. So in other words, the theory of behaviorism just considers a human being as an empty vessel. They do not treat them as, you can say, sort of an active learner. But the cognitism would consider that. But still it is a passive learning scenario. When it further explores, it becomes a passive learning scenario, but then it gives the human an ability to evaluate the circumstances and come to a conclusion. We'll discuss those things later, step by step. So the underlying concepts of cognitism involve how we think and gain knowledge. Again the same question, that how we learn. So one of these, again this theory tries to express that how we gain knowledge. Cognitism involves examining, learning, memory, problem solving skills and intelligence, all of them together. So you see, in this case the learner is considered the individual whose responsibility is to learn. In the theory of behaviorism, it was the instructor, it was instructor's responsibility to give that knowledge, to impart that knowledge, to fill that empty vessel. But in the case of cognitism, the learner is considered to be a problem solver, and he should have problem solving skills, and he is intelligent, and he would play part in the learning process. As I said earlier, grew in response to behaviorism. This theory actually was, it came up in the response to the theory of behaviorism around 1950s in the field of psychology, and it considered that knowledge is stored cognitively as symbols. Now that is another most important aspect. Learning is the process of connecting symbols in a meaningful and memorable way. So each part of knowledge is stored in the memory as certain symbols, right, is imparted on that blank slate as certain symbols. And so learning is the process that how you connect those symbols with each other, and how you form the associations, the meaningful associations, so that they can be remembered, so they can be recalled, so that they can be used. So the study focuses on the mental process that facilitates the symbol connection. It is actually, each and every individual is considered to gain knowledge from the system. And when they gain knowledge from the system, they impart them at different places. And then that individual establishes connection between those symbols and those knowledge segments. And the theories of cognitivism is actually focusing on how those connections are established. And it is based on, the learning process is based on to help the student, to help the learner to establish those connections. So, cognitive growth involves an interaction between basic human capabilities and culturally invented technologies that serve as amplifier of these capabilities. So, since, as we already said, that the theory of cognitivism considers humans' intellectual capabilities, the cognition ability, the cognitive development. So that is why it involves an interaction between basic human capabilities that exist, the learning capability, the listening, the understanding capability, the connecting capability, and then the environmental amplifiers, the environment that supports it. This is about the theory of cognitivism. We'll further explore that, we'll further explain that concept. These culturally invented technologies include not just obvious things such as computers and televisions, but also more abstract notions such as the way a culture categorizes phenomena and language itself. So in the end, this theory of cognitivism supports that individuals has those symbols in the mind, and all these tools, for example, the culturally invented technologies, for example, televisions and even computers and other medium of exchange, for example, this camera and this PowerPoint presentation, and then the language itself helps the individual to make those connections. You see, capability is inside. Capability is inside the learner already. The symbols are over there. But then this medium, this technology, the culturally oriented even technology, the scientifically created technology, helps the learner to make the connection between those symbols. Basic foundations in two, you can say, main theories are under the cognitive learning theory paradigm. Discovery learning by Jerome Bernard and meaningful verbal learning by David Ausubel. We'll discuss these two theories, and then you would understand. Discovery learning is, Bernard said that anybody can learn from the environment. Anybody can learn as long as at any age. provided as long as the learning terms are stated in the way that they understand. You see, everybody can learn. So it is about those technologies. It is about those technologies. So everybody can learn at any age. Everybody can learn at any age, can learn anything at any age, provided it is stated in terms that they can understand. So in other words, the symbols are there in their mind, but the way we make that individual or help that individual make connections. So it is about the cognitive learning considers the learner as an intellectual individual who can use his capabilities. Then the technology makes those tools, has created those tools which facilitate those capabilities, which amplify those capabilities. So if the symbols are there in the learner's mind, so at any age you can support the connection building process. So once they have those things in the memory, and once meaningful connections between two symbols are created, then that is a part of his knowledge, and that is a part that he can utilize. And then there are the main thing behind this is transfer. It can be transferred to many different situations. It can be in a classroom environment, it can be a workplace environment, it can be a family oriented environment, right? And only possible through discovery learning. The discovery learning is the concept where you help the learner learn himself. You do not you can say impart the knowledge directly, like in terms of behaviorism. In terms of behaviorism, you treat the learner as an empty vessel and you impart the knowledge. The Plato's concept, right? So that concept is that you impart the knowledge. But in cognitivism, you help the individual's problem solving skills get polished. You give knowledge to the individual to make those connections in his mind. Then you confront the learner with problems and help them find solutions. Rather than giving them solutions in their hands, you help them finding solutions. You do not present sequenced material. You do not present them with sequenced material that, okay, this is about this one, this is about this one. You make them solve those problems. You make them make those judgment calls. You make them you support them in making connections. If we look at this from the perspective of experiential learning also, when you go to an environment, when you go to a workplace, right, there are two kinds of bosses that you might face. One of the bosses would just tell you to do this and do it this way, right? And in that case, you would exactly do it that way. And in that case, you would just learn to do it that way. But if you are giving a scenario, if you are giving a case study, if you are given a problem to solve, and that boss of yours just supports you and let your intellect guide you in the right direction, that would be discovery based learning, that you discover knowledge yourself. And if you discover knowledge yourself, it is assumed under these theoretical foundations that that knowledge in your mind is there to stay. If you learn something yourself based on your discovery, then that thing is there to stay for you. Discovery learning is an inquiry-based constructivist learning theory that takes place in problem-solving situations where the learner draws on his or her own past experiences and existing knowledge. The connections are over there. The symbols are over there. Our own past experience, existing knowledge to discover facts and relationships and new truths to be learned. He makes those connections. If this top statement that is being shown on the slide, that you depend on the learner's past experience, learner's existing knowledge in his mind, the symbols that we were talking about, that this theory considers that there are symbols already placed inside the mind, and then they discover new facts based on the existing knowledge and create those relationships. You let them make those connections between those symbols. And that is the discovery learning process, that the learner discovers himself or herself. Students interact with the world by exploring and manipulating objects, wrestling with questions and controversies, or performing experiments. the concept of learning by doing, right? The philosophy behind experiential learning. That you cannot, behaviorism would be, I call you to a class, I give you a specific lecture. For example, in the subject of economics, for example in microeconomics, I give you a topic to study. I give you a book, a given sequence material. Okay, this is how we are going through, this is the book, and I give you a lecture. I deliver a lecture every time. And that would be directed learning, a teacher-centric environment, which was the criticism on behaviorism. Now in sort of cognitivism, in this kind of environment, specifically in terms of discovery learning, what you do is that you let them learn themselves. You give them a problem and let them explore it and find the solution themselves. It would be more of a practical environment. So students interact with the world on the problem that you have assigned them by exploring and manipulating objects, wrestling with questions and controversies, or performing experiments. That is how they would learn. And when they discover the knowledge themselves, then that knowledge is there to stay. That is the main theme of discovery learning, and it is the most important aspect of work-based learning also. Somehow an important aspect of work-based learning, because in work-based learning it is solely focused on that you learn by doing. But in this course, our focus is on consultancy project experiential learning, you know. So consultancy project, we would come to that later of course, but I need to give you a brief overview over here. Consultancy project is type of an environment where you can say that students are assigned to solve a problem for an organization, whatever type of problem they have, human resource problem, marketing problem, they want to introduce a new product, they want to get an optimal price for their product, they want to market a product, they want to penetrate the new market, whatever they want to do. In that case, a group of students would provide consultancy to them. They would evaluate the scenario, whatever knowledge they have learned, the existing knowledge that they have, the symbols that they have in their minds. And based on those existing symbols, they would observe the environment. They would actually ask questions. What if we introduce this product in this way? What if we set the price at this level? What if we solve this supply chain issue in this level? What if the consumers would behave in this way? They would go and explore that, and they would try to answer those questions. They would try to solve those controversies. And when they try to answer those questions and they try to solve those controversies, the end result would be that they would come to a solution. And when they come to a solution, they would present that solution to them. And that would be experiential learning in the field, and that would be consultancy project experiential learning, and that would be the discovery learning also. Because if the organization knew the solution themselves, they would never have opted for that consultancy project. So once the student goes and explores the actual on-ground problem, which the organization does not have resources to find a solution to, or do not have the capability or intellect or anything or time to find the solution to, they assign that to the students. And when the students go and explore that and ask various questions, then they discover and find the solution, the problem solving skills. And when they find the solution, that is discovery learning, and that comes under cognitivism somehow. The result is students may be more likely to remember concepts and knowledge discovered on their own, in contrast to the transmissionist model. Behaviorism would be a transmissionist model. For example, you can say the Plato's concept was transmissionist sort of. We can't specifically say that exactly, but still, when the concept of directed learning, let's put it this way, the concept of directed learning, the concept of you can say teacher-centric environment is a transmissionist model in which you transmit the information. You consider knowledge as absolute, and you give that absolute knowledge to the student, right? I know everything, and it is my job to transmit that to you. That is transmissionist model. But when you ask them to go and explore and find the solution, when they discover the knowledge for themselves, that is discovery learning. And the result is that students may be more likely to remember concepts and knowledge discovered on their own. The most important thing is this one. Models that are based upon discovery learning module include guided discovery, problem-based learning, simulation-based learning, case-based learning, incidental learning, among others. And I would say that consultancy projects, experiential learning would also be a part of it. So guided discovery would be you give them a problem and you guide them, okay, you can look at in that direction and find the solution and submit an assignment, for example. Problem based learning, you give them a problem and ask them to solve it. Case study based learning, you give them a case study, give them a scenario and then they solve for it. Simulation based learning would be create a simulated environment in which they would actually solve the problem, have the problem and learn from it. Incidental learning would be give them any incident, that this incident has taken place and what do you do about it. That would be incidental learning, give them a short scenario. So among these, all of these are sort of discovery based learning where the student would discover the problem themselves. In fact, the students would discover the solution themselves. You give them the problem, they discover the solution themselves. So this is cognitive learning theory or discovery based learning theory actually supports the experiential learning concept. That is why I said that we need to understand all the learning based theories, or we need to understand the glimpses of learning based theories and which theory would you should be using and how would you get knowledge. That is the important thing, right? You should be able to understand in this course when discussing various theories that what are the theoretical foundations. As I said, that theory plus experience is a perfect, you can say, combination. Just the theoretical foundations are not enough. For example, an individual given a theoretical knowledge of driving a car cannot drive a car on the road. An individual just having an experience, put him in the car and don't tell him anything, how to start the car, how to put it in the gear, how to accelerate, how to let the clutch go, even if it is an automatic car, how to give the right indicator or whatever. That just put him in the car and he won't be able to understand. If that had been the case, anybody could drive the car. But then what you do is, you ask them to sit in the car with you. You ask them to observe. You tell them this is how to do it. This is how you put it in the gear. This is how you let the clutch go. This is how the automatic car works. This is the right indicator. This is the car wipers. These are the lights. These are the hazards. This is the horn. Everything. You tell them each and everything. And then you guide them. You let them drive. You let them discover how much to speed up, how much to slow down, how much to brake, whatever. So it would be theory plus the experience that is required. So we are discussing the theory and we are giving you the theoretical foundations right here in this course, that you need to understand that what are the learning theories and how people learn, the main question. And then you need to choose that how you would learn and what you need to see when you go to a firm for a consultancy project, when you go to a firm for internship or job, and how would you learn, what would be the best environment, and you would grasp the most maximum knowledge in which you would be able to make those connections between those symbols. Then the second theory, meaningful verbal learning. There are advanced organizers. New material is presented in a systematic way and is connected to existing cognitive structures in a meaningful way. So you do not bombard the students with the information, right? Meaningful verbal learning is that you do not, advanced organizer is you can say a milestone. Advanced organizer is when you, for example, if you play a game, a video game, you move to the next stage of that game and then you are saved over there. And if you finish and you restart that game, you start from this point. That is further ahead from the previous point. So this is sort of the concept of advanced organizers. You give them new material in a systematic way and let them connect that material with the existing knowledge in a meaningful way. And when a learner has difficulty with new material, go back to the previous advanced organizer, which is an anchor now, right? The previous stage of the game. Where if you go to stage 2, and you cannot cross stage 2, next time you start the game at stage 2. You do not start the game at stage 3 or stage 1. You start at stage 2 and then step by step learning. So if you finish the game today at stage 4, the next time you start, you do not start at stage 3. Then that is the concept of advanced organizer. You give them knowledge in a systematic way. You let them connect that first piece of knowledge with the existing knowledge base that he has, make those meaningful connections of those symbols. And if a student has difficulty in, for example, stage 3, cannot cross stage 3, go back to stage 2. Start from there. Give them, have difficulty with new material, go back to the concrete anchors which have been established. He has already crossed stage, for example, 1. He could not cross stage 2 to get stage 3. So go back to the start and then start all over again. Let him make those connections all over again. The key concept of Ausubel was actually the proponent of this theory. He proposed that theory, is the cognitive structure. He sees this as the sum of all the knowledge we have acquired, as well as the relationships among facts, concepts and principles that make up that knowledge. So what is knowledge basically in his view? Knowledge is acquired based on the relationships between facts, concepts and principles that are over there in our minds. The symbols we were talking about previously. So those symbols, knowledge is basically the connection between those symbols. He sees this as the sum of all the knowledge we have acquired, as well as the relationships among the facts, concepts and principles. Knowledge is not just about one single statement. It is the connections with all the previous facts and concepts and, for example, principles that we have established in our mind. Learning for Ausubel is bringing something new into our cognitive structure and attaching it to our existing knowledge that is located there. It is about the connections. In cognitive learning, it is about making connections. Once an individual makes a connection, then that connection is there to stay. That connection is established. Then whenever you need to apply that knowledge, you know how that knowledge is related to other knowledge bases. So in the classroom, cognitivism in the classroom would be inquiry-oriented projects. It would be opportunities for testing the hypothesis. The curiosity would be encouraged. And stage scaffolding. You know, scaffolding is something that we use to reach high buildings. It is step by step. You climb up, for example, in the older times, they used to make a scaffolding, sort of step-by-step stages to reach the top. And then a stage scaffolding learning mechanism would be create stages. Let them complete the first one, then let them move on. So make a staged sort of learning. Let them learn this process completely, then move on to the next process. Information processing looks at how information is stored and retrieved. That is the main aspect. That it is about how that information is stored. How people learn in the theory of cognitivism is how they store that information by making connections that we discussed. They study in this theoretical base, they study the concept of making those connections, how people connect various knowledge bases with each other, various concepts and various phenomena that they have in their mind, how they connect those, and whenever a new knowledge is imparted, how that is connected to the existing knowledge. Learning is attained through rehearsal and consistent use of information. Retention strategies such as breaking down information and comparing the information to long-term storage are great techniques. So in practice, what you can do is, like when you have a new set of knowledge, you can see, you can either specifically break them down into small segments. You do not remember to read it as a whole. The concept of ratta that we use in our education system in many times. What you need to do is you need to impart that knowledge, break it up into smaller segments and then find the connections in your own mind. And if you establish those connections that already exist, then that would be stored in the long-term memory. This is how I would summarize this slide. Then again there are criticisms. Like behaviorism, knowledge itself is given and absolute. Knowledge is not absolute, right? Knowledge is not complete. Knowledge is always changing. Knowledge is always improving. So in this theoretical foundation, it is assumed that knowledge is absolute. Input process, output model is mechanistic and deterministic. This input mechanism that you give a learner a set of knowledge, that learner makes connections, and then the output is that they store that knowledge in some part of memory, and how they use that knowledge. So it seems a little mechanistic and deterministic, which actually does not happen. The individuality actually exists in the learning process. That is why the theories of learning are very difficult to apply to everybody, because there is always, yeah, exactly, it is mentioned in the slide, does not account for individuality. Now, because of this individuality, you cannot treat the learning process as a mechanistic view, input, process and output. It is based on individual characteristics. Each individual learns differently, and each individual might store information differently. Little emphasis on affective characteristics, especially motivation. Motivation would be the motivation to learn. And individuals, that would mean, because in the start it was assumed that individual can learn at any age and learn anything, provided that that information is given in the right terms. So even if that information is given in the right terms and the individual is not motivated enough to you can say incorporate that knowledge, then in that case it would not be important in a way this theory suggests. Those connections would not be made the way this theory would suggest. So after the criticism, let us move on to the second theory. Please do consider that we are short of time. There is so much to cover in this course, in the course of consultancy project experiential learning. There are so many theories of learning. There are so many concepts in experiential learning that we need to discuss. Then we also need to find the application of that. The problem is that that's why I'm going a little faster today. I'm trying to explain it as much possible with the examples, and I'm trying to be as clear as possible, but we need to go a little faster. So the next theory is the social learning theory. It is another very important aspect. Actually, it grew out of cognitivism. It was the theory of Alfred Bandura. Learning takes place through observation and sensorial experience. This is how people learn. Again, the question is how people would learn. You see that every theory has a different core foundation. It answers a different question. It does answer the question how people learn, but people learn in so many ways that you cannot generalize that. So social learning theory also it grew out of cognitivism. It is how people actually observe and use the information that they see, and then they model themselves in their behavior. But still, it is a little different from other theories you would see. Learning takes place through observation and sensorial experience, how the various sensations, the observation, our 5 senses. That's how people learn. That is the main focus of this theory. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. People have role models. Even children have role models. So people learn from their role models. And this theory is about that type of concept. You see, the last statement, that social learning theory is the basis of the movement against violence in media and video games. Do you understand this concept? So if people make role models, if people imitate, then in that case, these video games and the violence on the media, when people imitate that, that is not good for the society. So the social learning theory is the basis of the movement against violence in media and video games, because imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So if somebody has a role model, somebody likes something, then in that case they would try to imitate that something. Right? Many people would, for example, let's assume that you can say that some people would imitate, children would imitate their role models in cricket. Kids would also imitate their role models in movies. Some fictional hero who is very aggressive, who would beat up people whenever he does not like something around him, and young boys might consider him a role model. And if they consider him the role model, then they would automatically follow that. So that is the reason that social learning theory actually brought about that point, that people imitate, they observe, they use their sensory perceptions, and they imitate the role models. So this is how the social learning takes place from the society. People learn from other individuals. You learn from observation. This is how they do it. Okay, this is a good way to do it. I would do it the same way next time. You see? Bandora's social learning posits that people learn from one another via observation, imitation and modeling. This is how people learn from each other. If it weren't for like famous race car drivers, kids won't be driving fast these days. If they weren't for example, various stunts in the movies, kids won't be having those, doing those stunts in the real life. If there is not for the wrestling on the media being shown, then kids would not wrestle at home the way they do. So the point is, people learn from one another via observation, imitation, imitating their behavior, following their behavior, and modeling. Modeling would be considering the other individual as a role model and following that model, creating a model out of it, the perfect model that they consider that individual is, and then following him. The theory has often been called a bridge between behaviorist and cognitive learning theories because it encompasses attention, memory and motivation. So the gap between behaviorism and cognition is filled by the social. It is often assumed by certain researchers or authors that it fills up the gap between those two. That on one hand, behaviorists would say that people learn from their environment, positive stimuli and negative stimuli, and they are passive learners. And then in case of cognitive learning, people see, observe and then find solutions for themselves. So in between there is an environment that they see a role model. That role model, you like that role model, you see a behavior in the society, whatever type of that behavior is, you learn from that yourself, and then you discover that it is due to existing knowledge base. When you observe that new part of knowledge, you make connection with that and your behavior transforms in that direction. So that is why it is treated as a bridge between these two. So the necessary conditions for, there are 4 necessary conditions for effective modeling. Modeling would be considering somebody a role model, creating a model in front of you, and then observing that model and trying to be like that model. Even if it is a wrestler, for example, any other celebrity, a movie actor, or it is a cricketer, or it is a politician, or it is for example, a religious individual. Any type of an individual, you see them, he or she, as a model, and you try to follow that model. So this requires attention to pertinent clues, right? Looking at it very clearly, observing. You need to be attentive to observe. Code for memory: store a visual image and retention. You see that behavior, you see that model, you have your attention, because if you in order to in the basis of social learning theory, the basic most important thing would be attention. Because many things can divert your attention from a given concept. If in a learning environment, even we are sitting here right now, if in a learning environment your attention is diverted due to anything, you are not interested, for example, you do not have enough motivation to learn, I am boring for example right now, and for example there is a doorbell ringing, there is a mobile phone, there is Facebook and whatever you use, social media, there is a movie on a television, whatever those diversions are taking away your attention. You miss the pertinent clues. So while learning, when you are creating a model, while learning, you need to be attentive. And when you are attentive, you get that information. Maybe it's a role model that you are following, or maybe it is an ideal model that you are creating in your mind for any part of a knowledge, any type of a knowledge. You code that and you store that in your mind. Again, going back, making those connections in terms of cognitivism theory, I can say that from this statement. Then accurately reproduce the observed activity. Whenever you observed an occurrence taking place, for example, Shahid Afridi hitting a sixer. Wow, Shahid Afridi is my role model now, right? Giving focused attention. being attentive, how he did it and what did he do after it, his behavior, the complete hitting a 6 and then raising hands up in the air and whatever, his complete behavior. He's your role model, you want to imitate that. So you want to codify all the things and store them in your mind and retain them in your mind. If you cannot, the second condition is, necessary condition is that you need to be able to retain that in your mind. If you forget that completely, then you won't be able to follow that model. So if the learning process needs to be completed, first you need to be attentive, you need to see every detail, then you need to store each and every detail, break up into parts and then store it in your mind. And then after you store it in your mind, you need to have the capability to actually accurately reproduce it. That this is how he did it. Possess sufficient motivation to apply new learning. You need to be motivated enough. Whatever, now this is the learning that you have acquired. And once that learning that you have acquired is stored in your mind, then you need to be actually motivated enough to apply that next time. So next time you hit a 6, you raise your hands and act like Shahid Afridi, as an example, right? So these are the 4 necessary conditions of learning. Attention to pertinent clues, coding for memory, store a visual image, for example, for retention, coding for memory retention. Basically, you need to be, first you need to be able to be attentive, then you need to be able to code it and store it, because you can, whenever we store an image or whenever we observe a behavior in the environment, we need to store it in our minds. Accurately reproduce the observed activity next time it happens, and possess sufficient motivation to apply the new learning. Let me give you another example. For God forbids, you are walking on the road and you see an accident happening. Then all of a sudden a guy runs up, he picks up the injured person, maybe some motorbike hit somebody, he picks up the injured person, he puts him in his car and he drives out. You need to be attentive to observe the complete behavior, right? You like that behavior, that guy becomes a model. Role model, for example, not even a role model, but that whole model, that this is a good behavior that you like and you need to imitate that behavior. So now you need to codify that. You need to store each and everything. He parked the car in a convenient location, he went to that point, he picked up that individual and he placed that individual in the car and he drove to the hospital. That's what you saw. So you need to store that in your mind. Then next time you need to accurately be able to reproduce that if that event occurs. If, for example, now next time you are driving and you see a motorbike hit an individual and that individual also needs to go to the hospital, then you need to reproduce that event. You need to be able to accurately reproduce that. You need to see how that individual did it, and now you have to do it. Then possess sufficient motivation to do it. If you do not, you are not motivated enough to follow that role model of yours, or that whole model that you created in your mind, then you won't be able to do it. You need to be motivated enough to do it. For example, you consider a lecturer in your class as a role model, as a model, that this is how he teaches, it is wonderful, I need to follow that. So you need to be attentive how he does that. Does he prepare? How does he deliver? How does he communicate? How does he, everything, every minute detail, you need to see those clues. And if that model is good enough for you, you need to code that. You need to break up in the parts and store it in your memory, connect it with your existing knowledge base that you have. Then once you have that in your mind, you need to be able to accurately reproduce that activity. So you see, it's a step-by-step process, and all these necessary conditions are to be there. The individual need to be attentive. He should be able to code. The learner needs to be attentive. He should be able to code that information. He should be able to accurately reproduce that information. So whenever it is the time opportunity comes, you should be able to reproduce following that how that lecturer teaches in the class. And then you need to be motivated to do it, motivated enough to follow it. So that would be a complete learning process. This is how you would learn. So research indicates that following factors influence the strength of learning from models. How much power the model seems to have influence over you. How much that model, this is basically an abstract or extracts from various research based on social learning theory. And it indicates that factors that influence strength of learning from models based on these few scenarios. How much power a model seems to have, how much power he seems to have over you, how much capable the model seems to be. If you perceive him to be strong enough, if you perceive him to be capable enough, then that would motivate you to follow that model. How nurturing, caring the model seems to be, how much he would encourage following him as a role model, right? How similar to the learner, how similar the learner perceives himself or herself and the model. If the person you like, if the model that you have created, it can be a hypothetical model also. It does not have to be a person specifically. So if that hypothetical model is something that you perceive to be very different from you. For example, if you're a hockey player and you like a role model of a cricket player, then you are very different. His characteristics, what you observe from him cannot be applied over here. So if you are also a cricket player, then it is very close. This was a very layman sort of an example, but still it fits to this scenario. How close you perceive yourself to be closer to the model, that you are very close by. There are minute differences and I can adjust those differences, just fine tune a little to follow that model, to be completely like that model. How many models the learner observes, how many different role models that you see. How many, in terms of social learning theory, the main thing is that people observe and imitate to learn. They observe others' behaviors, they observe others' action, and then they learn from it. So if a single learner is following many models, then it would be very difficult to follow one concrete role model. But if you are just focused on one single individual, or one single role model, then in that case you would be able to follow it consistently. For interrelated processes, establish and strengthen identification with the model. There are 4 interrelated processes that establish and strengthen identification with the model. Now comes up, we had a question, we had a point in the last slide which said that how close the individual feels himself, how perceive, not feels but perceives, how close the individual perceives that he is or she is to the role model, to the model. So there are 4 interrelated processes: establish and strengthen identification with the model. Identification with the model would mean that you identify with him, with that individual. So children want to be like the model. For example, children believe that they are like the model. This is basically an extract from a research that have been done on young children, that how they follow certain individual, because that is what children do. Younger children, even because we still learn from observation, we still learn from imitation, we still see that okay, this guy or this person is doing this the best way, we should follow that. I would also do that. But this learning process is more inherent or more strengthened when we are children, because as kids we see other people, we are only observing, we learn each and everything from observation, in the start at least. We learn how to push the door open, we learn how to open a box, for example, we learn how to open for example a pen or a pencil or sharpen a pencil. Nobody would give a kid, okay, do it this way. They would observe and learn it, and they are very good observers. So then this thing actually becomes, you can say, dormant or less obvious when we grow up. So children want to be like the model, children believe they are like the model, children experience emotions like those the model is feeling, right? Children act like the model. Kids observe, the first people, mostly the kids would observe are their parents, and they start acting like their parents. If their parents are aggressive, the kids become aggressive. If their parents are polite, the kids become polite. If their parents, for example, fight with each other a lot, kids start fighting with each other. So this is how, because when the mother is crying, kids also start crying. So this is exactly the scenario that is portrayed over here. Children experience emotions like those the model is feeling, and children act like the model. Through identification, children come to believe they have the same characteristics as the model. When they identify themselves with the nurturant and competent model, children feel pleased and proud. And when they identify themselves with an inadequate model, children feel unhappy and insecure. A general observation about how children learn, the learning process, is that when they associate themselves, because as we said earlier, that you start to identify yourself. As I said, that this becomes less obvious and dormant when we grow up, because we have already created ourselves in the views of the models that we are. But we still learn from others. We still learn from observation. We still learn from imitation. Whenever you go to a place, you see somebody doing something that way, and if you like it, you would follow that. If I walk to a restaurant and somebody opens the door for me, I would appreciate that, and I would like that, and next time I would open the door for somebody. Right? So we also still do that, but that becomes less obvious, and that becomes a little dormant when we grow up. But as a kids, right now I have already created myself in the form that I had a role model. So when they identify with a good model, I would say simply good model and a bad model, an inadequate model and an adequate model. When I identify myself with a competent model, a nurturant model, I would be happy as a kid. I would feel pleased and proud, because that guy is pleased and proud. And if I follow some incompetent or you can say inadequate model, I would be unhappy and I would be insecure, because that role model would be unhappy and insecure. This is how the overall learning process takes place, specifically in you can say under the social learning theory. And then social learning theory in the classroom, collaborative learning and group work. Right? When students would, collaborative learning would be, students collaborate with each other and with the teacher to learn whatever the assignment is, whatever the topic is. Modeling responses and expectations would be another type of social learning taking place in the classroom. Opportunities to observe experts in action, that would be another type of learning process that can take place. For example, we would come to that. Job shadowing is something like that. When you go to a professional environment, you observe that professional actually working in the environment, and you want to work like that. So this type of social learning theory is actually applicable in the classroom environment also, and it is a part of, you can say, somehow it is part of you can say job shadowing program, or maybe it is part of work-based learning program also. Then there are again critiques on social learning theory. Does not take into account individuality, context and experiences as mediating factors. Whenever I observe a role model, then there are certain perceptions and certain life experience that make me different from that role model. And whenever in some certain way the role model behaves, I would perceive that based on my experience and based on my context. So this social learning, if I am trying to imitate, still my experiences matter. Already existing information with which I am connecting the latest information, that actually matters. So that is not actually part of this social learning theory. Suggests students learn best as passive receivers of sensory stimuli as opposed to being active learners. In this case, social learning theory again assumes students to be completely passive. They learn by observations and observing and others, and by doing like others do, or their model specifically. So they are treated as a passive learners in this case, not the active learners who have their own cognitive ability and who should discover the right behavior themselves. They would only observe and they would see how others would behave. Emotions and motivation not considered important or connected to learning. Emotions and motivations actually do matter in the learning process. How much you are motivated to learn, and motivations not connected, considered important or connected to learning under this theoretical foundation, which should be, I guess, motivation might be connected in some sense, because if you are not motivated enough to follow that behavior which you have recently learned, but what about the motivation to learn in the start? Motivation to change your behavior, motivation to observe from from the society. This is the motivation that the social learning theory discussed came as the last step. You should be motivated enough to apply that knowledge that you had previously stored. But in this case, what if you are not even motivated enough to store that information or follow a role model? Then that part of, you can say, that part of learning process is missing in the social learning theory also. So I guess we are out of time right now. In this third lecture, actually, we covered two theories, cognitivism and social learning theory. And cognitivism is basically the scenario in which there are two basic theories, the discovery learning, or maybe we can go to the slides and see through it. The discovery learning is the portion where the individual is expected to learn themselves, to acquire the knowledge themselves. So in discovery learning, which is actually by Jerome Bruner, discovery learning, the individual is in basic, the paradigm of cognitive learning theory, individuals are treated as having their own intellectual existing knowledge and experience imparted in their mind, those symbols, and the learning process should incorporate making the connections. The new information is provided and they make various connections with that information, and in that process they store it. There are two broad theories in cognitive learning theory paradigm, that is discovery learning and meaningful verbal learning. Discovery learning would be a scenario in which an individual would discover, the learner is expected to discover the knowledge themselves, and this theory considers that this discovery learning scenario in which they discover the knowledge themselves, then that knowledge is there to stay. That knowledge is stored permanently in their minds, and it considers that everybody can learn at any stage in their age, provided that the information is provided in the terms that they understand. Discovery learning is an inquiry-based constructive learning that takes place in problem-solving situations where the learner draws on his or her own past experiences and existing knowledge to discover facts and establish new relationships, and the result is that students may be more likely to remember concepts and knowledge discovered on their own. That is the important aspect of discovery learning. On the other hand, or slightly different from this, is meaningful verbal learning. It is still under the cognitive learning theory. Meaningful verbal learning is the concept in which there are advanced organizers. Advanced organizers are the case where you provide them a set of information and they connect that to the existing knowledge base. New material is provided, and that new material is somehow connected with the knowledge that there already exists, and then that is, if that is connected in a meaningful way, then that knowledge is important permanently in the student's mind. On the other hand, when a learner has a difficulty, those are the advanced organizer, that is like stage of a game. If the student has difficulty at the next stage, then they start all over at the previous stage. That would be, they go back to the advanced organizer and then try to rediscover, try to reconnect the new information. Then there is basically, there were criticisms on that also. For example, input-output model is very mechanistic, and knowledge is given as absolute, the main one, and then it does not incorporate, consider the concept of individuality within the individuals, their individual characteristics. Then came up the social learning theory, which grew out of cognitivism. This theory actually considers that the people actually learn from modeling. People learn from imitation and observation from the environment. And when they imitate and observe the other characters in that social environment, then they learn themselves. And there were 4 necessary conditions of effective modeling. Attention to pertinent clues. Number 1, you must be observant and attentive. Then you should be able to codify that information and store it permanently. You should be able to retrieve that information completely, accurately, and then you should be motivated enough to apply that model that you have created in your mind. And in this social learning theory was an important aspect most of all, that when for example, as I said, that in social learning theory, that it is more clear in terms of when we are kids, and it is less obvious when we grow up. We still learn from the social environment by observation and by imitation, but it is very less obvious. But in kids, when the slate is blank, they actually observe from learn from observation. They create a role model. They have a role model. They see their parents in the start, then might be their teachers, might be their friends, and might be their uncles and aunts or grandparents. And they create role models and try to follow that role model, try to be like that role model. The main thing is, when the learning process starts, how close you perceive yourself to be that role model. If you see your role model and yourself as very different individuals, then you won't be that motivated. If you see them, your two of you very close by, then you would be very much motivated. And the most important aspect is that when a kid identifies with a nurturant and competent model, the child would be pleased and proud. And when they identify themselves with an inadequate model, children would feel unhappy. So there are certain critiques on it also. Does not take into account individual context and experience as mediating factors. That would mean that there are existing experiences, and there I am another individual, but when I observe certain behavior, I perceived it based on my previous experiences, because I connected to my existing knowledge. And when I connected to my existing knowledge, that existing knowledge came from my experiences, which are different from the role model's experiences. So I would perceive that knowledge differently. I would perceive that behavior differently, and I would store that differently. So this is about all. We are actually out of time for third lecture, and we are still on the theories. I guess I need to be a little bit more faster in the next lecture. At least we have covered 2 theories. There are only, I guess, 3 or 4 left. So hope to see you soon in the next lecture. Take care. Allah Hafiz.